Hello and welcome to Media 7. In this week's program, we'll venture into the virtual world of video games and the all-too-real world of failed finance companies. But first, the New Zealand Herald was on the streets this week.
Just wondering if you know who the entertainer is that has name suppression?
No idea.
The other day, my brother just came over and said, I heard that the guy who it was...
I know who you're talking about. No, he should be the same as everyone else.
Everyone at uni knows, pretty much, yeah.
Yeah, everyone knows, I think.
Do you know much about name suppression laws and who gets them?
Yeah, it's a joke. It's too selective. It's too freely accessible to people that should probably face up to their responsibilities.
Who do you think should be allowed name suppression?
Only those that are victims of a crime, not those that commit the crime.
In what is now a campaign, the newspaper went big on the case of the prominent entertainer who recently received name suppression after pleading guilty to performing an indecent act with intent to insult. The Blitz follows the publication of a Law Commission report on suppression orders and precedes a high-powered seminar on the same topic. So, what's at stake here? Joining me now are Fire and Ice. You can decide which is which. Prominent barrister Gary Gottlieb and long-time newspaper journalist Jock Anderson. Welcome to you both, gentlemen. Gary, was I right in what I said there? Do you think that the Herald has now moved on from the particular case, the entertainer case, to a campaign on the law?
Oh, yes, it's quite clear that they are making a campaign to try and have the politicians step back and even say that the Law Commission's recommendations should be culled back, and that's not surprising. They've done that forever.
Well, as you say, it's not surprising. Journalists have always hated suppression laws, haven't they? I'm guessing that you are not terribly happy with what the Law Commission has come up with in its report, because it does recommend tightening criteria and clarifying it. It says it's too inconsistent in the lower courts and it should be harder to get name suppression.
Well, they've changed undue hardship to extreme hardship. It's tending to take away the discretion of the judge. There's lots of other ancillary matters that the court will look at sometimes, and some judges will stop being as robust as they are, but I really am concerned. The thing that the public don't realise is that probably 2/3 of suppression orders relate to people who are not known or not public, whatever. The media are not interested one little bit. They're only interested in someone who's a name. It could be some piddly little charge, and they want to be out there to try and make a bit of publicity to sell their papers or whatever that is.
So this is an interesting point that doesn't generally come across in the reporting, is that, you know, it's often referred to as celebrity justice, but this happens in courts every day.
All the time. You'll have judicial solicitors getting it for people so they can let their family know, maybe a small community, and because the effect upon individuals in a small community can be quite huge, and the talk machine goes around and people can be completely ruined in any sort of community by talk.
Why do you think the Law Commission report's authors have gone in this direction then? What's the motivation there?
Well, they're still keeping it, and they're still keeping a number of items. I, of course, am not quite as enthused about open justice as people think it is. You know, open justice came about, and we've just seen the Tudors, because there used to be Star Chamber and people used to had their heads chopped off with no basis of trial. The reality is that the media has somehow or other grasped upon that word as open justice and said, so we can publish anything. Well, hell's sake. I find that trials I have where the media are there are disjointed, disrupted, and do not do the interest of anyone any good at all. They just do not flow as they should. Jock, I'm guessing that you don't agree there, and I know you've had your battles with Gary in the past. What would you like to see in terms of name suppression? Do you think it should apply at all?
Well, my view is that really I don't see there's much need to make too many changes. I think that the discretion for name suppression must always rest with the judge. I think they are the best person to deal with it. My particular objection is the ease with which interim suppression is given if you're a rap star or an All Black or somebody, blah, blah, blah. And I understand what Gary is saying, that there is a whole lot of suppression orders given which we never report because there's simply people and charges and things that we're just not interested in. And the other thing is, of course, you can't be in all courts at all time. So when somebody who, for one reason or another, is a famous person, infamous person, celebrity, whatever, is charged, and as we know, the authorities tend only to charge those people who are guilty, then there is naturally a media interest. And the Herald, if it has launched a campaign, good on it. It did a very good job a few years ago during the America's Cup in that particular case, where it was able to wheedle out the identity and the details that went on behind the scenes that were orchestrated by a judge and a lawyer.
Are we talking about Peter Lewis?
Correct.
Yeah, the dope-smoking billionaire.
Yeah, I think myself that if you have people who have a high profile, I think that there is a penalty, if you like, that attaches to their behaviour if they're caught out doing things that, say, the rest of us might be treated differently. I mean, for argument's sake, if I was caught out doing something that I shouldn't be doing, there is no way on earth that I would expect or seek name suppression. Because
we'll wait and see.
But I would engage good, prominent senior counsel on my right here, and I'm sure he'd do a good job for me.
Is there not a danger, let's say that the Herald does actually score with this campaign it's running, and it does roll back even what the Law Commission has suggested, is there not a danger of judicial discretion being overridden by the discretion of people who want to sell newspapers?
No, I don't think so, and I think this is where I think the judiciary have to make it very clear that that will not happen. I think, again, depending on which court you're in, depending on which part of the country you're in, there can be a range of differences under the circumstances under which you get suppression. Interestingly, in that Law Commission report, it showed that there was really no difference in the district courts on the number of suppressions that were granted, but in my mind, quite a significant difference in the High Courts. In fact, the High Court is giving fewer suppressions. Maybe they're better judges. I think there certainly needs to be a guideline for judges, but not ticking boxes. I don't think ticking boxes is of any use in any form of the judicial system. But judges just have to be a bit more realistic and a bit more practical and say, well, for goodness sake, you know, if the Prime Minister's, presumably his kids, can tell him a name, then, and we can all read about these things on the internet, what is the practical use or value of making a suppression order on people who, within minutes, are widely known throughout the community?
And Gary, this is where we get to the futility argument, isn't it? In the age of the internet, is name suppression even practical anymore?
Well, yes, it is, and the Law Commission report refers to the internet and has talked of increasing penalties. Might I say they also accept there should be probably interim name suppression given almost more freely, provided you can set a case for it. And it's a lot of people don't ask for name suppression, but the impact it can have upon people, and as they say in there, the impact it may have upon the right for a fair trial can be huge. That's why there's often change of venue, because everyone in the community, people gossip, people talk rubbish, and they hear a little bit of hearsay, and suddenly that becomes the whole basis of a case.
But isn't that the problem? And we're seeing it with the entertainer case as well, where people who are not involved with that at all are finding suspicion falling on them because the name is not...
Well, Martin Finlay probably, I mentioned to you before, and you remembered many, many years ago, Martin Finlay, who was the Minister of Justice, who was a brilliant legal brain, brought in name suppression for everyone until convicted. But he had an exception if it tended to have a small group of people that it may be single to. In those cases, the name should not be suppressed. That's my belief. I thought that law was great.
And it didn't last long, though, Gary.
But, you know, it didn't last long because, once again, the Herald and others did a huge campaign to kill it. I was one of the few people that stood up at the time and supported it. So what they did, they suppressed my name whenever I had a case. They had counsel appeared, and for 18 months my name was never in the paper.
So is that? Are you saying? I mean, was that the media?
Was a nasty commercial decision for them to make.
Was that the news media working to frustrate the will of Parliament?
Absolutely. In fact, the media completely overturned that. That was just a media hype and beat up. And you see, the thing that really worries me now, you know who runs the world? It's the media. The only good thing I find about that is the media's imploding, and in the end they're going to implode, and everyone can just play on the bloody internet and make these stories up. But the reality is, good journalism's going. The good court reporters we used to have, they've got rid of them because they cost too much money, and we've got bunnies out there reporting rubbish.
But if we're still able to report the names of people who appear before these courts, I've got to support them on this to some extent, you know, because I've bemoaned the drop in standards in court reporting for ages, and I just wish I could do actual more hands-on court reporting myself. But yeah, what I was saying is, I think that the suspicion that falls on people and the gossip, and there's only one way to get rid of that. There's only one way to do away with suspicion and gossip, and that is to publish names. And then it's out there. There can be no mistake. There's nothing, and that kills the gossip just like that.
I presume, though, Jock, you would still support name suppression at the request of the victim?
No.
No.
You mean suppressing the victim's name?
No, suppressing the name of the convicted at the request of the victim.
No. No.
Well,
why would you?
Not even family members?
No. Why would you support
Well,
that?
I don't know. The Law Commission. You haven't read the report. The Law
No,
Commission.
I have. I've looked at it.
Yeah. Well, you've looked at it. You should read it.
And I noticed. I noticed that its primary recommendation was that there should be open justice.
Yeah. Well, that's the sort of little thing that they always talk about.
Well, that's the most important thing.
No,
sure.
but how can? For example, the law they reinforcing the law to remain that in a sex case, if there's incest, the name of the accused is not published because it will identify the victim. How do you...
I agree with that.
Well,
yeah, no problem with that.
Do you not think, though, Gary, that name suppression in itself has started to become more often than not counterproductive for well-known people? We always hear, every time this issue comes up, we hear about the 2005 case of the fringe All Black who got name suppression. The bit that's always left out is that it was at the request of his wife, who was the victim. And yet we keep hearing about that case. We don't hear ever about Sitiveni Sivavatu, a current All Black, who was convicted, well, discharged without conviction actually, but admitted doing it, of assaulting his wife more seriously. It seems that the very fact of a suppression order attracts attention.
Well,
it does.
Well, maybe so, but
I've
been involved in some cases, and admittedly there's no longer name suppression, but a very high-profile rugby league person who was acquitted. I was in court and I counted 19 media people there, and they started pushing and shoving each other in a frenzy to try and get closer to get the story. It was disgusting. Outside there was almost punch-up between the media people. We have changed from an ordered and sensible way of having reporting done to nothing more than sensational, selective and salacious reporting.
Yeah, but that's a sidebar to the issue of suppression. What you're talking about is competition and the need to meet deadlines.
Yeah, but the reason
and to some extent, I go along with you on that. I go along with you on that. But that really has little to do with suppression. And I'm interested to know as to when you're going to release the name of that client, because my understanding was that name suppression lasts forever.
No, that my client, his name was lifted, but I'm not going to mention his name.
We're nearly out of time, Jock, but it's been suggested to me this week that the entertainer in the midst of the current story is almost in the position now where his best choice would be to ask for the order to be dropped, go and negotiate himself a couple of soft interviews, one in print, one for TV, not be challenged, and he would give the media what they want and they would go away.
That is an interesting point. Now, the other thing in that, of course, is that supposing, for argument's sake, this person was to be, say, a star turn at some big event coming up that involved large numbers of young people going to it. And, I mean, would we be comfortable if your 15 or 16-year-old daughter was to go to a major event at which this person was going to be performing? And, I mean, how would you feel about that if you didn't know or did know, or he was surrounded by suspicion?
I think he'd have his clothes on.
He would have his clothes on.
Yes.
Well, you know, what sort of event are we talking about?
To be honest, Gary, we've seen that if you look at your views on the Herald, I've seen a couple of mothers saying that. One saying she's not going to let her daughters go to any pop music events until she finds out who it is.
I mean, that's over the top a bit. But I think you're right. I mean, if this person was to come out and say, look, I want to apply for the suppression to be lifted, it's not going to do the damage to my career and my ability to travel internationally, or whatever the excuses were that were given to justify the granting, then it would be a flurry of publicity for about 2 days and it would go. It'd be all over.
You know, if the people who are jumping up and down had actually read the written submissions and heard what was said in court and the reasons for it, there would be quite a different approach. But what happens is people go along and hear about 20 seconds and then they jump up and down and get offended. One of the problems is, and that judge was given a hard time, he didn't deserve the hard time.
There's 2 judges granted orders on that case.
And people, a little bit of knowledge is a dangerous thing. In the end, you've got to have some trust and faith in your judiciary.
Yep.
I have that, and I think there's a discretion that still remains. So the media just are going to keep running and running with it. But I really think, as much as Sir Geoffrey and myself have differences on name suppression, and I think it should have been wider, I think you'll find it pretty hard to move what the Law Commission's come up with.
Well,
Don't worry, Gary, I'll always use your name in my reports. Don't worry.
Never let it be said there's not a constructive relationship. Thank you, gentlemen. That concludes this discussion. Thank you too, Gary Gottlieb and Jock Anderson. After the break, we're on the games.